Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to one of my favorite novelists and an old friend of the show, Richard Doetsch. His new novel is Half Past Dawn, and this is his third appearance here. Now stick around. My head is still spinning from the 13th hour, so there's no telling where this one's going to go. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of lazy writers who can twist in the wind, but they'll never twist your mind in print like Richard Doetsch will, in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. I don't know why I put myself through this. It's bad enough I read books by writers who are so much better than I am at storytelling, but then I punish myself a little more by interviewing them. Richard Doetsch is one of those guys. He's so good at sucking me into his fast-paced adventure/crime stories. But just when I think he's finally written another just good enough story, there comes a turn, a twist, a gadget, an inside-out moment I didn't see coming that makes me want to chuck my computer and flip burgers for a living. And yes, Half Past Dawn is another one of those. Is it as good as The 13th Hour, which was my favorite book of 2010? Well, I can't quite say, because I stopped reading 50 pages shy of the end. Now, the reason I did that is the last two times Doetsch was on the show, I felt like I came perilously close to giving away crucial narrative details. This time, I'm not taking that chance. Now, Doetsch is a former real estate guy who followed his heart and gave up his previous vocation to become a professional scribbler. Now, I don't know whether he was great at selling property, but he sure as hell can sell a yarn. Richard Doetsch, welcome back to Mr. Media.
Hey Bob, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. I don't know which I like better, talking to you or reading one. Reading one of your books. It's not a contest. Sorry.
That's nice of you to say.
Well, you know, I've said it 3 times now, so I think it's pretty authentic. Now, let me start by saying this. If I only had 24 hours left to live, starting right now, which is, of course, in the mode of Half Past Dawn and Jack Keller, there are a lot of things I'd want to do, but right now at the top of the list would be finish those last 50 pages of your book.
Well, it's so funny you say that because there's a lot, as you mentioned, I always have a lot of twists and turns, and there are a lot of twists and turns in the last 50 pages. And, you know, interestingly, I have a little structured contest. And it was very hard to lay out the rules of the contest without giving away certain aspects of the plot. So I appreciate your, the deference to that.
I normally I take great pride in making sure that I complete the books of authors who come on the show, fiction or nonfiction. And I just had to make an exception today because I remember our previous conversation, and I remember thinking, I really just about gave it away. And I mean, there's certain things you give away when you describe the 13th hour because you have to tell people that it works backwards.
Right.
But you got to draw a line.
It's the funniest thing. The hardest thing to do with Half Past Dawn is actually describe it because I have my Thieves series, which are very, very linear. They're big world adventures. But then you have my standalone books, like The 13th Hour, which ran backwards. And now you have Half Past Dawn, which is this thriller, but it's hard to just categorize it into one area. And so it was interesting when they were playing out the marketing plan, how do we sell this book? And everyone's saying, is it The 13th Hour? No, it's not a sequel to The 13th Hour. Great roller coaster ride like The 13th Hour, but it's different.
Don't take this the wrong way, but it could have been, you could have taken those characters and dropped them into the story in certain ways. And,
no, you're right.
I mean, that could have happened. Now, as this book begins, let's talk about the book a little bit. Manhattan District Attorney Jack Keeler and his FBI agent wife, Mia, are believed dead. And I mentioned this to you the last time we talked about the 13th Hour. You're very tough on the wives of your heroes in these books, and I've yet to see your wife, so I would like to know again that she's okay.
You know what the irony is? My book is released today, and my wife has run off to Canada to compete in a dance competition. So, it's funny. I do put her through hell, and I think part of the reason is I've been with Virginia, who's my wife, for 33 years, and it's much easier to put myself and bring up these emotions of not only caring and love, but then what if they go into jeopardy? What if they are in harm's way? And that raises my blood pressure, and it comes out on the page. So yeah, I've hurt my wife a lot, but I love her very much, though she sleeps with one eye open.
And she is hiding out in Canada.
She is in a area not to be disclosed.
I imagine Dick Cheney knows where she is, and probably no one else.
Exactly.
And it's true. I mean, you write with great suspense. You write a lot of adventure in these stories, but it always comes back to this tenderness between the lead male character and his spouse. And we always get these moments of them making love and them having tender moments, and but there's just a little bit of tension there that seems to keep the relationship exciting and fresh.
Right. And if there's not, I always throw a little extra in. But it's funny when you write to connect with the reader and pull them on a journey, they need something to identify with. And and so many people do it very well, but it's when you can paint a picture of a relationship. Everybody has relationships, whether with a child or a father, a mother, a wife, a girlfriend, boyfriend. And once you can get them there, you can pull their emotions through the story much easier. If you can't portray that on the page, then it's much harder for the reader to relate, in my humble, silly opinion.
I was thinking about you a couple weeks ago. I interviewed a guy who used to be my agent, actually, Joel Fishman, who just published his first novel. It's called Primacy. And I was surprised reading it, and I'll tell you where this is leading, how I'm going to try to make a connection here. I was surprised reading it that his protagonist is a woman. And, he's not a guy I thought would write a book from the point of view of a woman and turn a woman into... Basically, he took this kind of mousy woman and turned her into Angelina Jolie by the time the thing was over. And I was thinking about you this morning, and I was thinking... I wonder if Richard would ever, turn the tables on himself, challenge himself, and put a woman in this lead role. Always the women have important roles in your books so far, but they're not the lead. And I wondered if you've given any thought to maybe kind of challenging yourself that way.
I have. Actually, when I started to write Half Past Dawn, I put the main character, I put Jack Keeler in jeopardy, kind of in jest with my wife, saying, okay, this time I'm going to put myself in jeopardy. But after I got to about the second chapter, I'm like, I have to do something to it. But, it's interesting. Some people can write from various perspectives. I do try to write, though I can, from a female perspective. And a lot of that is through my wife and is through my wife's friends. And it's funny, we go to a dinner party, and I will sit there and talk to as many women as possible, and then that comes back, and that helps imbue the character. And so coming up with the character to make the protagonist the lead person, I absolutely could do it. I will do it. I have a character in my Thieves series called Casey Ryan, who is an amalgam, of several people. And I could actually see her as a standalone and carry a whole novel on her own. So
I could see that in her case as well. Yeah. And I was just thinking about another writer, and it's probably better that I can't think of his name at the moment, but he writes this detective series from the point of view of the detective's dog.
Oh yeah, they're published by Atria, and guess what? We're on the same mental capacity right now, where it's like,
Yeah, and it's probably better when you hear the story. So, so
And interestingly enough, we have the same editor.
yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah,
And I think I probably know him because of your shared publicist, David,
right. Because of
who
David Brown.
who's an old friend of mine. But um, so this guy writes these books from the point of view of the dog,
Right.
and when I had him on the show, I interviewed him, you know, with the pretense that I was interviewing the dog, and it was just a radio, it wasn't the video. And
Right.
he played along for a few minutes, but then he got really pissed off. He didn't like it, and I thought, well, wait a minute, you're going to write a whole book from the perspective of the dog, and I can't try to talk to you from the. I don't. Okay, you know.
You know what's funny? Some people read it. Those are great books. I
Yeah,
actually,
no, they're very good.
and I'm embarrassed that I can't remember his name at the moment. I always put my dogs are in every book, and right now we have three dogs. And the irony is, I'm really not the dog person in the house. My wife is, and my kids are. And I had in one of my books had my character run off, the other side of the world, and I got a letter from a reader saying, "How could you leave your dog Hawk alone? What did he do all this time?" And I was like, "Wow, there is a connection." And so people do relate not only to the female or the male, but they relate to the pet.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And oh, that fellow's book. It's I think the title. Because people are going to want to know. Thereby Hangs a Tale, I think was one, and I think Doggone It, I think.
Doggone It
I
was the
think is
first,
it. Yeah,
right?
but anyway, I don't want to name him by name because I think he's still pissed. Now, so let's come back to your stuff. The thing I loved, of course, about the 13th Hour was the crazy backward structure that nonetheless built to this kind of brilliant climax. And that book, well, this book relies on flashbacks also to build the suspense and the danger, but in a different way. And I wondered if, thinking about it, if there are any particular authors who have worked in the past in flashback or use flashback effectively who have influenced you to use it the way you do.
I really can't think of really any. It's the flashback aspect of the 13th Hour really came about by trying to write a story that went backwards.
Hmm.
And that's, starting with chapter 12 and then, moving down to 1. And it just became such a fun way to do it. And when I was doing Half Past Dawn, by putting it in a very finite period of time, which is really 24 hours, to get that backstory in there to help fill out Jack Keeler's mind, I had to leap back. I had to fill in. I think we've lost each other. Oh, there we are. We had to fill in what occurred in his life in the last week. Because what happened on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday really is the culmination of what's occurring to him now in this 24-hour period of time. So, and it's also a fun way to write because you are unveiling, these little pieces and these little, plot devices that, give you an aha moment or give you a surprise. So you really can't do it much in film. And so when you translate something like Half Past Dawn to film, which, we actually should be doing, you really have to keep it more linear unless you have a creative way to do your backstory, such as Memento. I think they did a great job going backwards, and filling in the memory.
And we'll in the second half of the interview we'll talk about movies. So save that because I do want to talk to you about that. What, if anything, was different about the way this book came together versus, say, the 13th Hour, in terms of either the way you did it, or just the structure, or just the way you approached it?
When I did the 13th Hour, I came up with the concept and I married it to two other pieces, and basically it gelled in my mind on April 20th. It was actually on my wife's birthday where it all gelled, and I knew the whole story in my head on that day, and just, I ended up writing it in the month of July. With Half Past Dawn, I had actually seen somebody who read their own obituary, and I thought, wow, imagine if you did that and everyone thought you were dead. What could you do with that? So me being devious, I would have so much fun. But, I started to figure out, well, here's a germination for an idea. And as I've mentioned before, I try to write down story ideas every single day, and not fully fleshed out, but give one first, second, and third act and just keep a file of them. And I pulled this, into a story of a guy trying to find his wife in a very finite period of time. And I had happened down to the Tombs in Manhattan, which is a federal penitentiary. That's where all the courts are, everything else. There are evidence rooms, and I wanted to weave that into a story. And, over about a 30-day period, I ended up fleshing out this Half Past Dawn. And it was one of those things as I went, I just decided, you know what, let me make a left turn here. Didn't plan it. There is questions of Michael's mental stability, whether, some people think, oh my gosh, he's a ghost. He's running around here and, he's chasing that. And, there's, without giving too much away, there's all of that, but there's none of that. And it was trying to be original.
So, Richard, if you excuse me a minute, I'm just writing down a story idea of my own. Go to Byram Hills, kidnap Richard, steal notes for stories.
Right. It's called the Everyday Story Outline. There's
Okay,
about
right here.
when. There you go.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm just giving up on doing it myself. I'm just going to come up there and take yours. Um, so let me ask you a question. You actually went to Manhattan to the Tombs and you did on-site research and you became aware of this stuff. You couldn't go to the Four Seasons in Turkey for Thieves of Darkness, but you went to the Tombs in Manhattan.
You know, it's,
You know,
there was no excuse because it was only about an hour away. And the interesting thing is, I was in the real estate world. I was a developer, investor, and I had worked on a building down on 25 Broad Street, which is right across from the New York Stock Exchange. And this building was actually where they used to hold the stock certificates back in the day. And that's where you have these people called runners that are on the floor. The runners actually used to run over and they would swap stock certificates. In the basement of this building was a structure that is incredible. You had this 25-foot circular vault door. You open it up, you go inside, there are probably 10 individual vaults with 10-foot diameter doors. You open those, you go in, and you have all these individual lock boxes, and that's where the stock certificates were. Mm-hmm. But the room was all mahogany. It was from a different age. And I was involved with the development of that. And that always sat in the back of my mind. And Center Street, which is not too far away, where the Tombs is, they've got this lower structure. And so I kind of married this world from 25 Center Street to the Tombs. And there is a theft that has to take place out of there. And in the basement of the Tombs, actually 6 floors down, is where they keep all of the evidence that's used by the New York City police, by the federal government, by pending cases in my story. And so you need to have this penetration down there. And I always thought, how cool would it be to try and break in there? So that's one aspect of Half Past Dawn. Part of it growing out of my memory, part of it, doing a little research, part of it just having fun.
well, and so for people who maybe didn't get my reference earlier in the Thieves of Darkness, the last Michael St. Pierre book, there's this very detailed scene, pretty much at the beginning, I think. Well, not quite at the beginning, but a little past the beginning, where the characters are at the Four Seasons Hotel in Turkey, and the detail is astonishing. And I was very taken with that because I worked with the founder of the Four Seasons on his autobiography, And I remember asking you about it, and you said no, you had never been there, and
No.
you just did the research. And I thought, oh man, I'm just crushed. But you actually went to the tombs in this.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing, a very close friend of mine, he's actually the godfather of my daughter, stayed at that hotel in Turkey. And that hotel was a former prison.
Right.
And that's actually the main reason that ended up in there. And he went there, he said my description, everything was spot on accurate. So,
Do they carry the 13th hour in the book in the gift shop though? That's what I want to know.
well, the funny thing is, I was just published in Turkey for not only the 13th Hour, but the Thieves of Darkness. So, and it was a big bestseller there.
Wow.
It is a lot of it takes place in there, so it's kind of obvious, but
Very cool. And did I just say the 13th Hour? I meant to say Thieves of Darkness.
that's
Um,
okay.
okay.
They're both sold there.
All right. So last question for this half of the show. Very important, probably the most important question I'll ever ask you. I'm going to hold up the book, although we're showing slides during the course of the show. Folks, you can see it's half hyphen past dawn. Okay, so riddle me this, writer boy. Here's the press release: half, no hyphen, past
Right.
dawn. What
Well,
what's gone wrong here, my friend?
well, obviously I'm a better writer because that was put out by my publisher, and you would think that they would have the editorial staff go through everything, before they put it out. But, such is life. May
Is
we
it,
all be accused of such minor mistakes.
is it, seriously? Was it one of those things where it was down to the last minute? Is there going to be a hyphen, or is there not, or did somebody just miss it on the press release?
No, you know what? Somebody stuck the hyphen in. I'm terrible at grammar, so I said, okay, why not? And the interesting thing about the title is I had no title for the book. And the opening line was half past dawn, the world just coming alive or coming awake, whatever I wrote. And when you save a document in Word, it usually grabs the first line. And it grabbed just half past dawn. I clicked save. And that just was what it was as I kept saving it. Untitled, I sent it to my editor. She's like, oh, that's a perfect title. It's kind of like the 13th Hour. It ties into the whole timing thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? So that's the odd way this book got titled.
So you know what's going to happen now. Microsoft Word, they're going to hear this, and now they're going to start charging an extra 10% because they're going to start promoting Word as being able to title your next best-selling novel.
Right.
No.
Maybe I can get a percentage.
Good luck with that. All right, let's take a quick break.
Sure.
This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media interview with one of my favorite modern suspense novelists, Richard Doetsch. He's the author of The 13th Hour, The Thieves of Darkness, and his latest, Half Past Dawn. And we'll be right back. Hey folks, you can hear Mr. Media while on the go now with Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher is a free news and talk mobile app available for your smartphone, whether you use an iPhone, iPod Touch, Android, BlackBerry Curve, or Palm Pre. And when you download Stitcher to hear Mr. Media today, you have a chance to win some real money. Downloading is quick and easy. Just find Stitcher in your smartphone's app store. Download it, it's free, takes seconds. Then, during registration, hit the promo code box and enter Mr. Media, that's MR Media, to get automatically entered to win $100. The latest episode of Mr. Media will be waiting for you in Stitcher's favorites right on your phone. You'll get access to lots of other amazing shows too, always available to you on demand, no syncing. Some of my favorites include WTF with Mark Maron, Plus One Per Diem with Kevin Smith, and The Nerdist with Chris Hardwick. It's all free and all instant to you on Stitcher Smart Radio. And don't forget to win the money. Enter promo code Mr. Media, MR Media, when you register. And thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Guy Kawasaki. You're listening to Mr. Media, you poor slob.
Well, this is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media interview with one of my favorite novelists, Richard Doetsch. His latest book is Half Past Dawn. Richard, amazing reviews coming out for this book just in the last couple of days. We're talking on the day of publication, and I'm guessing that probably some of this has been building because there's people who have been reading the other books, and maybe they got to them after they came out, and then they kind of felt like they discovered you, in the process. And now that there's a new one, the book reviewers are just jumping all over it. They want to get out there and say, hey, you got to read this book.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I'm thrilled with the coverage that I've been getting. We had probably 200 reviews hit yesterday in anticipation of today. Everything with ABC News calling it one of the best thrillers of the year, and a gut-wrenching read like on the Huffington Post and all these places. And I was very shocked, but very pleased with the way that it's rolling out. And it's interesting, as you alluded to. When the 13th Hour came out, that's actually being made by New Line Cinema. We had terrific sales, but the awareness took a long time, to kind of roll. And I think that, as you mentioned, that awareness is beginning to build where somebody says, oh, I picked up the 13th Hour. I can't wait to read Half Past Dawn. And so I think I'm bearing the fruits of those prior books.
Glad it's all worked out for you.
Yeah. So, it's always good, when you write something and people actually not only enjoy it, but purchase it. So.
And you can usually tell when they've read it and then they haven't. So.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I love to do. I love to mess with somebody. Oh, Richard, I loved your last book. I'm like, oh my God, did you see the character I based on you named, Larry? He's like, Larry was great. I'm like, oh, there's no Larry.
Well, like I say, you can get me up until the last 50 pages. I had to stop. But, we want to talk about climbing the skyscraper. See what I'm saying? Okay?
Right.
I'm in there. Let's get caught up for a minute on the pending film adaptations of your books, starting, of course, with my favorite, The 13th Hour. The last time we spoke, you were really excited about the script. What's the status of that now?
Right now, they did a slight rewrite on the script just to kind of build up the emotional aspect, and it just kind of polished it, and that polish is terrific. And they have set the director, and they are just about to set the lead actor, and both of them are great. You're second. You know what? If they fall through, they're going right for you.
Okay.
And
who's the director?
Can't tell you, because what's amazing is they love to announce that the book has been sold. When they announced the 13th Hour was sold, we basically agreed over the phone. The contract took like 4 months. So they announced it before it was all in writing. But when they get to the director or the actor, they want it all inked up. And, one of the things that happens so often in Hollywood, somebody says, well, George Clooney is attached. But George Clooney isn't signed. Mm-hmm. And so you'll see, well, George Clooney is no longer attached. We want to have the full, ship ready to sail.
I saw that this morning. The latest film adaptation of Superman. The actress who plays Superman's mother,
Julia Ormond.
It was supposed to be Julia Ormond, but this morning they announced, or yesterday they announced, that it was going to be somebody else, and they start production this week. So yeah, that's a treacherous world out there.
Oh, it's crazy. In an interesting sidebar, we've sold The Thieves of Darkness. And I've actually been writing the screenplay for that with a amazing, Hollywood talent guy who has written, Armageddon, and he's won Hawaii Five-0. He's just a terrific guy. And we're writing together and looking just to package the whole thing and have it all set so we can just basically go in with a green light. And in Hollywood, it's all about the green light. And
that's Shane Salerno.
That's Shane Salerno.
Okay.
And Shane actually, has done a lot to really goose and bring up the bar on the new Hawaii Five-0. He actually just wrapped on a movie called Savages, which Oliver Stone directed, which has everybody from Salma Hayek and John Travolta and Blake Lively, just a really great cast. He did the same thing. He wrote the screenplay with the author of Savages. So, got Oliver Stone, got his actors, got his green light, announced it, and it took off. And we're following that same path with The Thieves of Darkness.
They've done a hell of a job on Hawaii Five-0. That is
Yeah.
absolutely amazing to watch.
I couldn't believe it. You see all these retreads, and it's just, oh my God, it's going to be a disaster. That one, they nailed it.
Oh, it looks beautiful, and that, I mean, when you saw the first episode, it looked beautiful. But then there's this story. There's a story there that did not exist in the
Right.
original. I mean, it
No,
just
they have such great backstory, and they've got such an emotional core. And again, this goes to a lot of my writing.
Mhm.
The emotional core is really what's important, and it's about every story that I write. It's about really saving someone that you love, and it's not really about saving the world. It may be about saving others, but it's that one person you love, and when you care, you really can, hold on to that reader or hold on to that film goer. And that's why Hawaii Five-0 works. And that's why, I've had, a little success with the books I've been writing.
a little, oh, just a,
So,
just a little.
just a touch.
He
So.
can now afford the large coffee at Starbucks instead of the.
Right.
So now, Thieves of Heaven was the first that was option. Is that right?
Correct.
And then, are you saying that Thieves of Darkness is being sold separately?
Correct.
Now that's interesting because I would have thought that it's essentially a series, same characters. No.
It is. It is. It's a complicated legal thing, but they were taking time at Fox, and it may be a joint at the end of the day, a joint venture, but it may happen that the Thieves of Darkness will arrive before the Thieves of Heaven.
God. Again,
So,
Hollywood.
it's what is great. I've always been able to sell to them, and I think part of the reason is I've got these big concepts, and those are kind of few and far between out there. But it's always been about the characters, and watching the whole process, whether it was on the Thieves of Heaven, watching it with the 13th Hour. People think that a movie gets made in a year, and they don't realize it could take 5 years, sometimes 10 years, and you can pound your head against the wall. And I always thought that getting a book out there took a long time, from writing it to actually, having it published. But film it's daunting.
So, are you saying that we could wind up with one studio producing Thieves of Heaven, and let's say I'm just making this up, Clive Owen as Michael St. Pierre, and then another studio makes another one, and we wind up with Keanu Reeves as Michael
No,
St. Pierre?
no, there'll be continuity.
Oh, okay.
It'll
All
be,
right.
that'll all be worked out.
Good.
So,
I would steer clear of Keanu Reeves. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, no, we actually have a terrific actor in mind for Michael St. Pierre. And it's so hard to do. It's something that we always run by my daughter and my son who are in their early 20s. And they're very clued in on, who's good, who's happening, but who's real. And my daughter had an excellent idea. We passed it on to the studio, and they're all over it. So.
Very cool. And the other thing I remembered from the last time we spoke is that you were very, and you seem a little more evolved in your point of view about Hollywood this time than the last time we spoke. But last time you were very supportive, certainly in interviews and in your email newsletter about what's going on in Hollywood. But I wondered if you've kind of seen the other side of Hollywood now, the downside that kind of gets projects delayed and things slow down, and they don't always go as they are talked about going, on the front end.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm very lucky. The people that I work with, I look at as the antithesis of the Hollywood stereotype. whether it's Mike DeLuca and his right hand, this woman Alyssa Phillips, who are the producers on the 13th Hour. They're outstanding, very communicative. They keep pushing it forward. You know, whether it's Shane Salerno or the People Fox. I've been very lucky. You know, the rest of the world beyond those little doors could be a disaster, but I haven't been turned off. I think part of it is you start to get an education as to the realistic release dates and everything else, and you anticipate holdups. But I'm not jaded, at least yet.
Not yet. That's good. That's good. And let's get back to the subject of the books themselves. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that The Thieves of Legend is due in 2012. Will that be the next book after Half Past On?
Yeah, well, it's actually all done, and interestingly enough, we flip-flopped the release dates. I had written Half Past Dawn and handed it in March of 2010, and I then wrote The Thieves of Legend, handed that in like November of 2010, and there were some certain things going on in my life. I like to do. As you know, I skydive, adventure race, triathlons, all this stuff. And there was something that I was doing that actually ties very well to The Thieves of Legend. And so we decided in the spring to flip-flop the release of The Thieves of Legend, and we crashed through Half Past Dawn. And it was edited in basically a month. Cover was done, the whole 9 yards. It was very quick. So anybody who tells you that it can take forever to publish a book, no. If the book's written, they can get it out. But Thieves of Legend is completely done. It's almost done being edited. It will be out in the spring. And it's a great story. It really takes Michael St. Pierre and Casey Ryan where they were at the end of Thieves of Darkness and takes it to the next level. All over China.
Very cool. Which, of course, you've been to all over the place.
I've been everywhere, in my mind.
In your mind. And, just thinking, so do you have the same editor for the Thieves series as well as these separate books?
Do you know The Thieves of Heaven was edited by a woman, Kate Misiak, at Random House. She's Lee Childs. My second book was edited at Random House, really Bantam Dell, by another gentleman. Thieves of Darkness and the 13th Hour were edited by Peter Borland. And Half Past Dawn was edited by Sarah Branham along with Peter Borland. And Peter's really still my chief editor. He's really the editor-in-chief of Adria, but Sarah did all the heavy lifting.
Interesting.
So it's always different. And the funny thing is, every time you get the manuscript back, everyone's got a little bit different style, and you learn to roll with it. But I'm very lucky. I work with great people. Sarah, who edited this, did a fantastic job, I think.
And the biggest question I'm going to ask today, when will we get our hands on the sequel to the 13th Hour?
That will come right after The Thieves of Legend. And it came out really, it's so weird when you get excited about something that, you never want to brag about your child, but it came out great. I didn't know how it would go, but I came up with, it's a completely different story, but it follows the same, stepping back in time in 1 hour increments, but it just kind of raised the bar. And so it'll be great.
All right. One last thing to ask you about today, and we always appreciate and enjoy your time here. Later today, just by coincidence, I'm interviewing another novelist, someone you may have heard of, a fellow named Bruce J. Friedman. He just published his memoirs. It's called Lucky Bruce, and it's astonishing for all the experiences that he had over the course of his career with legendary writers of his day, his contemporaries, Norman Mailer, Mario Puzo, Gay Talese, Isaac Bashevis Singer. And I had to ask you at this point. You're about 5-6 books into your career. Any contemporary literary adventures of your own that you might share or tell us about?
Well, do you mean literary adventures
with other writers or?
No, you know what? I don't know any other writers. I have a good friend, John Bay, who wrote a legal thriller that some people are looking at right now. But other than that, and well, actually, two other writers I know, but they screenwriters, Michael Brandt and Derek Haas. Beyond that, nobody else.
Wow.
But you know, the funny thing is, a lot of writers that I've met are not as so. I'm very social. They're not as social. They're not as open. They live more up in their head. And I like experiencing life. And you know, in all of my books, it's drawing on doing crazy things. And you know, as I mentioned before, I did a lot of triathlons. You know, this summer, last summer. You know, I'll crash on my bike, when somebody falls in front of me going 30 miles an hour and, get all ripped up. I can put that in a story, And when I go skydiving, jumping out of a plane and you feel that adrenaline rush, you can marry that into anything that you're writing. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody skydiving. It could just be that feeling of fear or anticipation. And so I live my life with a whole bunch of different people and a whole bunch of different experiences. And a lot of writers that I find are creating it in their mind, which is great. But I like to kind of go live it, then put it into the paper.
Yeah, I seem to recall somebody falling out of a plane at the beginning, skydiving out of a plane at the beginning of Thieves of Darkness.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, you got to put those skydiving lessons. You got to get your money's worth out of that.
It's research. Anytime you go, it's actually a tax deduction if it's research. And so I am constantly doing research.
Just protect the fingers on the way down so that you can
exactly
get your money's worth. All right, folks, listen, you can find Richard Doetsch's latest amazing novel, Half Past On, in great bookstores everywhere, or you can order it online right now at a great price at mrmedia.com. Richard's website is richarddoetsch.com. I'm going to cheat and look because I just know I'll say it wrong. So it's Richard, and then it's DOETSCH.com. And he's out there. He does the social media stuff, Twitter, Facebook, all that kind of stuff. You want to subscribe to his email newsletter on the site. Very good about keeping people up to date on stuff. There's contests. You can win autographed copies of his books. He's a very smart man when he comes to marketing and making himself aware of that. So I suspect he probably did pretty well at real estate, to kind of follow up on something I mentioned earlier. Richard, it is always so much fun to hear from our mutual acquaintance David that you've got a new book, and even better to actually have you on the show to talk about it. And I wish you much good luck with this book and the movies. Looking forward to seeing you your stuff on the big screen very soon.
Thanks, Bob. I so appreciate all your support. This is the third time, that we've done this, and, I look forward to the next 50 years of doing it. So, and you know what? And we'll do it in person, because I do go to Florida.
Oh, well, that would be great. Let's plan on that then.
All right.
All right, Richard. Thank you so much for being on Mr. Media today.
Bob, it's my pleasure. Thanks very much.